I sacrificed everything to raise my sister's baby. When she abandoned him, my parents called him my burden, my girlfriend left me, and now they're all in court lying against me because there's suddenly inheritance money on the table. Hey Reddit, I'm a paramedic, and 10 years ago, my whole life changed in one night when my sister showed up in the worst way possible. Since then, it's just been me and the kid she left behind. Thought I'd share how it all went down. So I'm Randy, 34 male. But this story started when I was 24 and still thought I had my whole life figured out. I was working as a paramedic back then, which meant my days were long, loud, and filled with way too much chaos. But I loved it. At that age, I had a girlfriend named Megan who was always on me about our future. And me? I wasn't against it. I figured I'd grind for a while, climb a bit in my job, maybe buy a starter home before 30. Everything was on track. That Tuesday night smashed all that to pieces. I'd just gotten home from a brutal 12-hour shift. I threw myself onto the couch, still in my work pants, half dead, scrolling for takeout. My plan was simple. Eat, shower, pass out. Maybe call Megan if I had the energy. Then my doorbell rang. At first, I ignored it. Who the hell rings a doorbell at 9:30 at night on a rainy Tuesday? But it rang again, louder, like whoever it was wasn't leaving. I dragged myself up, already annoyed, and opened the door. What I saw nearly knocked the tired right out of me. There was a car seat on my welcome mat, soaked from the rain but covered with a thin blanket. My first thought was someone left trash or some old crap out here. Then I saw the blanket move. My stomach dropped. I pulled it back. And sure enough, a baby. A tiny little boy, maybe 3 months old, cheeks red from the cold, eyes squeezed shut like the whole world was too much already. Tucked into the side was a note. The handwriting hit me like a punch. I knew it instantly. My sister's. Gabriella. His name is Alex. I can't do this. Take care of him. I'm sorry. That was it. No explanation. No number. Nothing. Just those words. I stood there like an idiot, holding that piece of paper, rain soaking my hair, staring at this baby like maybe the universe would give me a better answer if I waited. No such luck. The medic in me kicked in first. I checked if he was breathing right, warm enough, not in immediate danger. He was fine, just sleeping. Then the big brother in me kicked in, pissed off like hell. Gabriella had always been the type to run from problems, but abandoning her own kid? On my doorstep? Like I was some emergency babysitter she could clock in and out of? That hit different. I called her phone over and over, straight to voicemail. Of course. Then I called my parents because what the hell else do you do? I told them what happened, expecting at least some kind of, "We'll be right there." My dad's exact words, "He's your burden now." My mom added, "We told her not to have that baby. This is typical Gabriella. Don't drag us into it." And then they hung up. I swear I just stood in my living room staring at my phone for like 5 minutes, wondering if I'd lost my mind. That was their grandson, their flesh and blood. And they were just done? I looked back at the baby, Alex. He was still asleep, probably dreaming baby dreams while my life was about to take a 180. I felt this weird mix of panic and stubbornness. Panic because, yeah, I didn't know the first damn thing about taking care of an infant. Stubbornness because if Gabriella and my parents were going to tap out, then fine. But I wasn't the kind of guy who quits on someone who can't fend for themselves. I called Megan next, figuring maybe she'd talk me down, help me think. Instead, she flipped out. A baby? Your sister just dumped her baby on you? You need to call social services. This isn't your responsibility, Randy. I told her I couldn't just hand him over to strangers in the middle of the night. She doubled down, said it was exactly the kind of drama my family always dragged me into, and that I shouldn't get pulled into it. Then she hung up too. So there I was. No plan, no backup, no clue what kind of formula a 3-month-old even drank. I buckled Alex back into the car seat and drove to the 24-hour supermarket, still in my work uniform. People stared at me wandering the baby aisle, holding my phone up while I frantically Googled best formula for 3-month-old and diaper sizes chart. A sweet old lady working the night shift finally came over, probably thinking I was some clueless new dad, and walked me through the basics. Formula, bottles, diapers, wipes. She even gave me a coupon booklet. That night was the longest of my life. By the time morning came, Alex was alive, fed, and looking at me with these big dark eyes like he was testing me already. And that was it. Game over. I wasn't calling social services. I wasn't dumping him at a hospital. I wasn't going to be another person in his life that failed him. That night, sitting on my couch with him in my arms, I said it out loud. "All right, kid. Looks like it's me and you now. Don't worry. I got you." I said it like I believed it. But the truth? I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Being a paramedic had trained me to deal with life and death situations, but keeping a baby alive day to day? Whole different battlefield. That first week was like boot camp. No manual, no preparation, just me winging it. Alex cried whenever I thought I'd finally figured him out. And sleep? Forget it. I was used to running on little rest. But this was insane. 2 hours here, 1 hour there. Alarms going off in my head every time he made a noise. By the end of day 3, I was seeing double. I tried calling Gabriella again, over and over. Still nothing. My parents didn't even check in. Not once. That's when it really sank in. This wasn't temporary. Nobody was swooping in. This was all on me. Work became the next problem. Paramedic shifts aren't exactly babysitter friendly. I called my supervisor, explained what happened. Luckily, he knew I wasn't the kind of guy who called out unless it was serious. So he gave me emergency family leave for a bit. But that was just a band-aid. If Gabriella didn't come back soon, I was going to have to figure out childcare on a paramedic's salary, which isn't exactly rolling in cash. Meanwhile, Megan stopped by once, mostly to confirm this whole thing wasn't some kind of misunderstanding. She stood in my living room, arms crossed, watching me struggle with Alex like I was auditioning for a reality show called Worst Dad Ever. "You can't keep him, Randy," she said flatly. "This is ridiculous. Call the system. They'll find someone." I looked down at Alex. He was asleep against my chest, fist clutched in my shirt like he already knew the world was against him. "He's not going anywhere," I told her. That was the last real conversation we had. By week 2, I realized my one-bedroom apartment wasn't going to cut it. Between the gear piling up and the constant noise, I needed more space. I found a 2-bedroom closer to work. The legal side hit next. I filed a police report about Gabriella disappearing, but since she technically left Alex with family, they didn't consider it a crime. They basically shrugged and said, "She's not missing, she just left." A lawyer told me I needed to file for temporary guardianship. That meant paperwork, court visits, home inspections. They fingerprinted me, interviewed me, dug through my life like I was applying for a security clearance. It was humiliating, but I did it. The paramedic side of me was good with medical stuff, taking his temperature, knowing when something was wrong, but nothing prepared me for the emotional toll. Watching him cry for hours with colic and not being able to fix it, that got under my skin more than any ambulance call. I'd pace the floor with him on my shoulder, whispering like he could understand. "I don't know what I'm doing, kid, but I swear I'm trying." My parents? Still no help. They'd show up maybe once a month, if that. My mom would hold Alex like he was some kind of fragile museum piece, then hand him back as soon as he cried. My dad barely looked at him. Always the same question. "Any word from Gabriella?" And when I'd say no, he'd just grunt and change the subject. The only real support came from outside my family. My coworkers surprised me with a baby shower at the station. They showed up with diapers, clothes, bottles, stuff I hadn't even thought to buy. One of the nurses I worked with gave me a pack-and-play crib. My neighbor, Mrs. Garcia, started watching Alex for an hour here and there so I could run errands. Little by little, I built a support system. After a month, I started to get the hang of it. Feeding schedules made sense. I could change a diaper in under a minute. I figured out which brand of formula didn't wreck his stomach. He started smiling, and I'll be honest, that made it all worth it. The first time Alex looked up at me with that goofy baby grin, I knew I was hooked. That night, I sat beside his crib, watching him sleep, and I whispered the same thing I'd said the night he showed up. "I got you, kid. No matter what. You're mine now." And for the first time since Gabriella dropped him on my doorstep, I actually believed it. But saying those words and living them out were two different things. 5 years went by faster than I thought, but they were also some of the hardest years of my life. Being a paramedic was already a job that chewed people up. Long hours, unpredictable shifts, dealing with other people's emergencies all day. Add in being a single dad to a kid who had no one else. That's where the grind really started. I got good at living tired. I'd finish a double shift and still sit at the table with Alex, building block towers or coloring dinosaurs, because even if I had nothing left in the tank, he deserved my attention. I missed out on sleep, on nights out, on dating, but I didn't miss out on him. And that was the only thing that mattered. Money was tight. Diapers, daycare, pediatric checkups. They don't tell you how fast that adds up. I picked up every extra shift I could. Some months I'd just grind out overtime shifts whenever they needed coverage, just to make sure rent and groceries balanced. I wasn't saving much, but I kept us afloat. Meanwhile, my parents stayed on the sidelines. They'd see Alex a handful of times a year, but it was always the same vibe. My mom would bring some random toy that had nothing to do with his interests, like she didn't even bother to know him. My dad stayed quiet, still bitter about Gabriella's disappearance, but that bitterness spilled over onto Alex too. He treated him like some unwanted reminder instead of a grandson. I stopped expecting anything from them. Gabriella, ghost. Not a single call, not a letter, nothing. At first, I used to check my phone, half expecting her to show up or demand him back. By year 2, I stopped waiting. She was gone. Alex, though, he was thriving. He hit his milestones one by one. First steps, first words, first scraped knee from running too fast in the park. I kept track of everything. Not for Gabriella, but for him. So that when he got older, he'd know I cared enough to remember it all. I took pictures, kept drawings, saved little notes his daycare teachers sent home. One night when he was 3, he looked up at me while I was tucking him in and said, "Good night, Dad." It froze me. Up until then, I'd been Randy or Uncle Randy when other kids asked him who I was. But that night, he called me Dad without hesitation, like he just decided it was true. And honestly, he was right. I didn't correct him. I didn't stop him. I just kissed his forehead and said, "Good night, buddy." After that, I was Dad. Period. By the time he started kindergarten, I had our routines down to a science. Mornings were like a small military operation. I'd wake up before him, throw on the coffee, make breakfast, pack his lunch, then get him up. He always wanted to wear the shirts with dinosaurs or superheroes, never the plain ones. He'd sit on the counter while I tied his shoes because he said it made him feel like a big kid. Then I'd drop him at school, head to work, and do it all again. The job took hits, no doubt. I turned down a promotion to a supervisor role because it meant more overnight shifts and more paperwork hours I couldn't juggle. Some of the younger guys at the station didn't get it. They thought I was crazy for passing up career advancement, but I knew I couldn't be both a full-time dad and chase the top of the ladder. I made peace with that choice. We had each other, and we were making it work. The funny thing is, Alex didn't know any different. He didn't sit around comparing his life to kids with both parents. To him, life was normal. Me showing up at every school event, me making dinosaur-shaped pancakes on Sundays, me building blanket forts in the living room on Friday nights. He'd brag to his friends, "My dad can drive an ambulance and fix anything." He saw me as more than I saw myself. By the 5th year, we had our little world running like clockwork. Our apartment walls were covered with his drawings and school photos. His backpack always hung by the door, ready to go. We had traditions. Friday movie nights, Saturday park trips, Sunday breakfasts. I'd look at him sometimes and think about that rainy night Gabriella dumped him on me. The same kid who showed up as a screaming, helpless baby was now this confident little boy who lit up every room he walked into. And I'd feel that same surge of stubbornness I felt the first night, only stronger. He was mine, my responsibility, my kid, my family, and no matter who tried to say otherwise, I wasn't letting anyone take him. Turns out someone was about to try. It happened when Alex was 9. Regular Tuesday night, nothing unusual. We were sitting at the table, working on his science project about the solar system. He was gluing foam planets onto cardboard. I was helping him keep Jupiter from rolling off the side when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, I don't pick those up, but something made me swipe anyway. Hello? There was a pause. Then a voice I hadn't heard in almost a decade. "Randy, it's me, Gabriella." I felt my whole body tense. For a second, I thought it was a prank. But no, there was that same shaky tone she'd always had, the one she used whenever she wanted something. I stepped into my room, closed the door. "Where the hell have you been?" She sighed like she was the victim. "I've been recovering. I got help, Randy. I'm clean now. Married, stable. I've turned my life around." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "Yeah? And while you were off finding yourself, I was raising the kid you dumped like trash on my doorstep." She ignored the jab. "I want to see him. I think I'm ready now. Please." Ready now? Like motherhood was some hobby she could put down and pick back up? I told her we'd meet at a cafe. No Alex yet. I wanted answers first. When I walked in the next day, I almost didn't recognize her. Clean clothes, hair done, sitting there like she'd never been the same girl who scribbled sorry on a note and disappeared. And next to her was Tony, her husband. Perfectly pressed shirt, fake nice smile. He stuck out his hand like we were old buddies. I didn't take it. I didn't rush things. I kept Alex out of it at first while I sorted through whether she was serious or just playing house with Tony. A week later, against my better judgment, I finally let them come over for dinner. My mistake. Because I figured Alex deserved to at least meet his so-called mother. Gabriella gave me some speech about being sober for years, getting her life together, marrying Tony, landing a decent job. She even cried when I showed her photos of Alex. For a second, I almost thought maybe she had changed. Maybe. But then dinner happened. We ate in tense silence until dessert, when Gabriella cleared her throat like she was about to make some big announcement. "We've been talking," she said, glancing at Tony. "And we think it's time Alex comes to live with us. Legally, I'm his mother." My fork hit the plate loud enough that Alex looked over from the living room where he was showing Tony his art supplies. I lowered my voice so he wouldn't hear. "You've got some nerve. You vanish for a decade. Leave me to raise him, and now you waltz in with your clean haircut and your banker husband and think you can just collect him like an Amazon package?" Tony piped up, smooth as oil. "Randy, it's not about that. We can give him more. A house, a yard, better schools, college savings. You've done an amazing job. But let's be honest, he deserves more than what you can provide." That's when I leaned forward, locked eyes with him. "Listen carefully. Money doesn't make you a father. Consistency does. Sacrifice does. I've been there for every milestone, every doctor's visit, every nightmare at 2 a.m. You're just the guy who married the woman who walked away." Gabriella flinched. "I was sick back then, Randy. You don't understand." "No, I understand perfectly. You chose drugs over your kid. You chose running away over facing your responsibilities. Don't act like you're some victim. You left me with a baby and a note, and I had two choices: step up or dump him in foster care. Guess which one I picked? The right one. Because unlike you, I don't run." Her face tightened. Tony put a hand on her arm, like he was coaching her not to explode. "We're his real family," she tried again. That's when I lost any shred of patience. "Real family? He doesn't even call you mom. He doesn't know you. He calls me dad, because that's what I am. You're just the woman who abandoned him." Don't confuse biology with parenting. The room went ice cold. Alex was still in the living room, thankfully distracted, but I saw Gabriella's jaw clench. They left soon after, throwing out fake polite goodbyes, but I could feel the storm brewing. A week later, the storm hit harder. My parents called, suddenly interested in hosting a family dinner. Against my better judgment, I brought Alex. When we walked in, guess who was sitting there like royalty? Gabriella and Tony. My parents were beaming like she was the prodigal daughter returned from exile. My dad cleared his throat after the meal. "Randy, we've decided. Alex should be with his real mother. Gabriella's stable now, and Tony makes good money. It's what's best for him." I looked around the table, realizing in that moment it was me against all of them. My own parents, who'd written off their grandson, were suddenly acting like they cared now that Gabriella had cleaned up. "You've got to be kidding me," I said. "You two wouldn't even babysit him when he was an infant. You called him my burden. And now that she's back, you want to rewrite history? No chance." Gabriella looked smug, like she had backup now. My mom patted her hand and said, "Blood is blood, Randy. You've done enough. It's time to do what's right." I stood up, grabbed Alex's coat, and called over my shoulder. "Blood doesn't erase 10 years of absence, and it sure as hell doesn't erase abandonment. He stays with me. End of discussion." Alex was quiet in the car on the way home, staring out the window. Finally, in a small voice, he asked, "Nana said I might go live with Aunt Gabriella. Is that true?" My chest tightened. "No, buddy. You're with me, always. But she said she's my real mom." I pulled the car over, turned to face him. "Listen to me. She might have given birth to you, but being a mom or dad isn't about that. It's about who's there, who shows up every single day. That's me. You're my son. Nothing changes that." When he studied me for a second, then whispered, "Cross your heart?" I crossed my heart, just like we'd done with every important promise since he was little. Cross my heart. That night, as I tucked him in, he whispered half asleep, "I don't want to leave." And I promised again, silently, as I stood in the doorway, over my dead body. I'd fought for this kid since the night he showed up in a rain-soaked car seat, and I wasn't about to let Gabriella back in after a decade and play Mom of the Year. But a promise in the dark is one thing. What came next was war. About 3 weeks later, a certified letter showed up in my mailbox. Thick envelope, fancy law office letterhead. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. Sure enough, petition to dissolve the temporary guardianship and transfer legal and physical custody to her. Not just visitation, full custody. I stood there in my kitchen, reading through words that felt like knives. Best interests of the child. Reunification with biological parent. Termination of guardianship. Every legal phrase boiled down to one thing. They wanted to rip Alex out of my life like I was some temporary babysitter. When I flipped to the supporting affidavits, my blood boiled. My parents had both signed statements backing Gabriella. My mother claimed I'd isolated Alex from his real family, that I refused their visits, that I alienated him from traditions. My father added that I'd misrepresented the abandonment as permanent and kept Alex from bonding with his mother. They were asking the court to terminate my guardianship and award her primary custody, with me reduced to visitation. I actually laughed out loud. Ugly, bitter laugh. These were the same people who told me he's your burden now and barely showed up for birthdays. Now they were pretending I was the villain who kept them away? I dropped the papers on the counter so hard Alex came out of his room asking what was wrong. I plastered on a fake smile and told him it was nothing. But inside, I was already planning my counterattack. The next day, I hired an attorney. Julia Hernandez, family law specialist, came highly recommended. Her office was warm, kids' books on the shelves, toys in the corner. She got it. She didn't sugarcoat. Biological parents have strong rights, she said after reading through everything. Biological parents have strong rights. As Alex's court-appointed guardian, you've provided stability for years, so she has to convince the court to dissolve your guardianship and transfer custody. We'll argue best interests and continuity. The affidavits from your parents muddy things, but we can fight them. Do you have records? Documentation? Oh, did I? I'd kept everything. Text messages from my parents canceling visits last minute. Emails where they criticized me for being too soft. Appointment logs showing me at every doctor visit. School reports with my signature. I'd saved them without even realizing why. Now they were ammunition. Julia smiled when she saw my binder. This helps. A lot. We'll build the case around stability, consistency, and what's truly best for Alex. But be ready. They'll dig into every corner of your life. And they did. Gabriella's attorney went straight for the jugular. They requested my financial records, my work schedule, even my dating history. They painted me as a guy who worked too much, made just enough money to scrape by, and wasn't giving Alex the ideal lifestyle. Meanwhile, Gabriella and Tony paraded their 4-bedroom house, yard, dual incomes, and traditional family structure like it was some kind of trophy. I'll admit, it stung. Watching them act like they'd built some perfect setup, while I knew damn well Tony was just the guy who signed on after Gabriella bailed, made me want to flip the table. But I stayed calm, because if there's one thing being a paramedic teaches you, it's how to keep your head when everyone else is losing theirs. Alex, though, he felt it. He started waking up from nightmares, crying that someone was going to take him away. And I booked him with a child psychologist, someone trained to help kids process heavy stuff. The report came back clear as day. Alex associated me with safety and stability, Gabriella with fear and uncertainty. Forcing him to move would cause serious emotional trauma. That went straight into my evidence pile. But I knew we needed more. So I called the same private investigator I'd used years back when I tried to track Gabriella. Guy was worth every dollar. A month into digging, he came back with gold. Tony had a history. Domestic violence charge in his past, dismissed under sketchy circumstances. Their perfect finances? Not so perfect. The house was mortgaged to the ceiling. His business was barely staying afloat. And the kicker? He'd traced Gabriella and Tony searching for Alex's biological father, who, surprise, surprise, had inherited millions recently. Without Gabriella's cooperation, I didn't have enough to locate him back then, and my priority was keeping Alex stable. So it wasn't about reuniting mother and child. It was about dollar signs. I sat on that folder of evidence like it was dynamite, waiting for the right moment. In the meantime, my parents doubled down. They'd call me, suddenly acting like wise advisors. Randy, you need to think about what's best for Alex. A boy needs a mother. My mom even had the nerve to say, maybe this was the plan all along. You were just holding him until Gabriella was ready. I roasted her right there on the phone. The plan? The plan was me waking up every 2 hours to feed him while you sat on your hands. The plan was me working doubles to pay daycare while you played bingo. Don't act like this was some grand arrangement. You bailed. I didn't. She hung up. Fine by me. By the time the court date approached, I'd stopped trying to keep peace. My job wasn't to make anyone comfortable, it was to win. I built my case brick by brick. School records, medical records, text logs, psychologist reports, PI findings. Meanwhile, Gabriella and Tony strutted around with their picture-perfect facade. So when the day came, and I walked into that courthouse, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. I was ready. Because I knew the facts. And I knew Gabriella couldn't hide from them forever. The courthouse felt more like a battlefield than a building that morning. Gray stone, high ceilings, rows of benches. It was designed to make you feel small. But I walked in with my head high, suit pressed, folder of evidence tucked under my arm like a weapon. Alex wasn't with me. His art teacher had offered to keep him busy, so he wouldn't have to sit through the circus. Smart move. Gabriella and Tony were already there, sitting at their table like they were posing for a magazine cover. She had on a floral dress, soft makeup, fake maternal glow. Tony wore a sharp suit, slicked hair, smug expression like he'd already won. And behind them, my parents, sitting stiff-backed, eyes locked forward like they were backing royalty. I didn't even look at them. They weren't my concern anymore. The judge, a silver-haired woman with glasses halfway down her nose, opened the hearing. This is the matter of custody concerning Alex Carter. The court's priority is the best interest of the child. All testimony and evidence will be weighed with that in mind. Gabriella went first. She played her role well, talked about her recovery, her marriage, her job, cried in the right places. I made mistakes when I was young, but I've rebuilt my life. I can give Alex a stable home with 2 parents, financial security, and everything a child deserves. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Tony followed. He leaned into the provider angle, bragged about their house, the school district, his thriving business. He even had the nerve to thank me for doing such a good job holding things together until Gabriella was ready. Like I'd just been warming the seat. I wanted to tear into them right there, but I waited. Then it was my turn. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and told the truth. No theatrics, no tears, just facts. Your Honor, Gabriella didn't just make mistakes. She abandoned Alex. She left him in a car seat on my doorstep with a note that said, "I can't do this." I was 24, single, working long shifts as a paramedic. But I stepped up. I raised him. For 10 years, I've been his only parent. Not because it was convenient, because it was the right thing to do. I laid out the records, school attendance, medical appointments, report cards with my signature, letters from teachers who wrote about my involvement, photos from birthdays and holidays. Then the psychologist's report. Alex saw me as his father, associated Gabriella with instability and fear. Gabriella's lawyer tried to poke holes, painting me as stretched thin, financially limited, lacking resources compared to the child's biological mother. I let him talk. Then I dropped the line I'd been saving. Resources don't raise kids. People do. Money doesn't comfort them when they're sick at 2 a.m. Money doesn't show up to every school event. I did. For a decade. That's what being a parent is. The judge nodded slightly. I could tell it landed. And then came the sealed folder. Julia, my attorney, stood and handed it to the judge. We have additional evidence that directly speaks to motive and credibility. The judge opened it, brows furrowing as she scanned the contents. She looked up over her glasses at Gabriella and Tony. Do you two know what Mr. Carter has provided here? Gabriella shifted in her seat. I'm not sure what you mean. The judge's voice was sharp now. Perhaps you should be, because this evidence paints a very different picture than the one you've presented. The courtroom went silent. The folder held everything the private investigator dug up. Proof that Gabriella and Tony had tracked down Alex's biological father, Jason Reynolds. Proof they'd learned he'd inherited millions. Proof they planned to leverage custody to claim support payments and benefits tied to that money. The PI pulled public records and travel documents tying Tony's business trips to Jason's inheritance. Later, my attorney got the rest through subpoenas. Emails, financial statements, even messages between Gabriella and my parents. It also held Tony's background. Domestic violence charge from years back, financial records showing their thriving business was one bad month from bankruptcy, their house mortgaged to the ceiling. The judge stacked the papers neatly, her expression unreadable. Mrs. Ruiz, she said. Gabriella had taken Tony's last name. You claim this is about providing stability and love for your son. But the evidence suggests financial motives, deceit, and a troubling lack of transparency. How do you explain this? Gabriella stammered, eyes darting to Tony, then to my parents, then back to the judge. That's not true. This is twisted. We just wanted... Enough! The judge cut her off. For the first time, Tony looked rattled. He leaned back, jaw tight, probably realizing the money grab just blew up in his face. My parents looked pale, like they'd bet on the wrong horse and knew it. Julia stood again. Your Honor, this case isn't about who has the bigger house. It's about who's been there. Alex doesn't need new parents. He already has one who's proven himself for 10 years. That's Randy. The judge nodded slowly. I'll review all testimony and evidence, but let me be clear. This court does not look kindly on manipulation, particularly when it comes at the expense of a child's well-being. When she adjourned for the day, Gabriella wouldn't even look at me. Tony stormed out first, jaw clenched. My parents trailed behind, avoiding my eyes. I stayed seated for a minute, letting the adrenaline drain. Julia leaned over. That folder just turned this case on its head. They're finished. And in that moment, I knew she was right. Gabriella couldn't hide anymore. The truth was out, and it was ugly. The battle wasn't over yet, but for the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't just fighting to survive. I was winning. When the gavel came down a week later, it felt like 10 years of weight lifted off my shoulders. The courtroom was packed again. Gabriella and Tony in their polished outfits, my parents sitting stiff behind them, me at my table with nothing but a folder full of truth. The judge adjusted her glasses, voice steady. The court awards Randy Carter sole legal and physical custody. Petition to dissolve the guardianship and transfer custody is denied. The prior temporary guardianship is superseded by this custody order. I didn't breathe until she finished the sentence. Then it hit me. We won. The judge didn't stop there. She turned to Gabriella. Abandoning your child for nearly a decade, then returning only when financial opportunity appeared, shows a disregard for his well-being. This court cannot overlook that. Gabriella's face crumbled. For once, no tears came. Just shock, like she couldn't believe the sympathy act didn't work. Tony leaned away from her, stone-faced. I caught the look, calculating, already separating himself. Then the judge aimed at my parents. Your affidavits contained statements directly contradicted by evidence. This court is deeply concerned by your willingness to mislead. It does not reflect well on your credibility or intentions. My mom's lips trembled. My dad looked like he'd swallowed glass. They'd gambled on Gabriella's comeback and lost, big time. When the session ended, I didn't linger. I packed my folder, nodded to Julia, and headed for the doors. As I passed, Tony stood abruptly and hissed something at Gabriella. Low enough I couldn't hear, but sharp enough to make her flinch. By the time I stepped outside, he was already striding toward the parking lot alone. That's when it hit me. He was done with her. No money, no prize. He was out. Gabriella stumbled out a few minutes later, calling after him. He didn't even turn around. My parents shuffled behind her, not daring to look at me. For once, I didn't care. They'd shown their cards. They weren't my family anymore. What mattered was waiting just outside on the steps. Alex, holding his art teacher's hand, eyes wide like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. He spotted me, broke into a run, and nearly tackled me with a hug. Dad, did we win? I hugged him back, tighter than ever. Yeah, buddy. We won. You're staying right where you belong. He leaned back, grinning. Told you the judge would pick you. I laughed. Guess you're smarter than both of us. We walked down those courthouse steps hand in hand, past Gabriella standing alone on the sidewalk, past my parents staring at the ground. Alex didn't even glance their way. He just squeezed my hand and kept walking. That night, we sat on the couch, eating pizza straight from the box, his dinosaur toy propped next to him like it needed to celebrate too. For the first time in months, there was no weight in the room. No fear of someone knocking on the door with papers. Just us. I looked at him. This kid who'd been left with nothing but a note, who I'd carried through sleepless nights, scraped knees, science projects, and now a custody battle. And I realized something. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up, who stays. Gabriella ran. Tony bailed. My parents chose convenience over truth, so I cut them off. But me, I stayed. And I'll keep staying. Over my dead body, no one will ever take Alex away. That's the promise I made the night he showed up on my doorstep. And now it's one I get to keep for life.